course, we're going to do that now. So in other words, what does that mean? I work with youth-serving agencies across the county to collaborate on suicide prevention efforts, in addition to managing our youth suicide prevention education programs here at the Alliance for Suicide Prevention. I am going to be your moderator for this portion of the event. At this time, you are all in a listen-only mode, so please keep your mic muted for the duration of this session, and any questions can be submitted in the chat. I love an active chat, so please do share your questions and your thoughts as we go along. Please note that the session will be recorded, and I'm standing by if it needs any assistance. We have emotional support in each room. If you need any emotional assistance, please look for the person named support, and you can send them a private message. Thank you all again for joining us today. And our main speaker for this session is Larimer County Commissioner John Kefalas. John, it's an honor to have you here with us today. Before I turn it over to you to learn more about what is happening in our community, I'm actually going to briefly highlight why economic stability is an important part of suicide prevention. All right, so you all can bear with me for one moment. I'm going to share my screen again. All righty. Testing, testing. Hopefully you can all see that. So this is one of our pillars, economic stability, which is the belief that by implementing economic stability efforts, protective factors will increase and risk factors will decrease, therefore preventing suicide deaths as well as attempts. So I just want to briefly touch on why economic stability is a part of suicide prevention and why it is one of our 6 pillars. I think this pillar is really exciting and interesting because often economic stability is not necessarily the first thing that people think of when they think about suicide prevention, if they think of it at all. But we know that suicide does not just happen to people with mental illness. And in fact, external factors can be a big part of why suicide can occur. So things like losing a job, not being able to afford rent, not being able to afford food, are actually some really common factors that can lead people to contemplate suicide. This pillar to me is especially interesting as we're talking about losing a job, not being able to afford rent or food, when we're in the middle of a pandemic. This has actually risen to be a national conversation. So economic stability is actually something that is needed to thrive and is one of the most overlooked areas of health in our life. We know that stress is something that can lead to thoughts of suicide. And we also know that economic instability can be a major cause of stress in people's lives. I was so glad to hear Scott mention in our opening words that by raising the minimum wage just by $1 can actually decrease suicide by around 4% in communities. That's amazing. Did anyone know that? I didn't know that until I started to research why economic stability matters for suicide prevention. So before I turn it to John, I want to talk about the 4 kind of main buckets of this pillar when we're talking about economic stability. So part number 1, increasing awareness of food security initiatives. Part number 2, increasing awareness of access to affordable housing and transportation programs. I don't know about you all, but I know that here in Larimer County, the housing conversation is such an important one. Increasing access to economic benefits to ensure family economic stability, so making sure families are supported. And finally, increase access to affordable childcare. This is definitely a huge passion area of mine, and we want to make sure that young people and families are supported and taken care of, and that economic stability is considered a main area of mental, emotional health. We heard Scott talk a little bit earlier about those social determinants of health, and that actually includes mental health as well. So I am very excited to hear from John about some of the things that are happening locally in our community. John, let's see. You should now be able to share your screen. Welcome.
Thank you, Cecilia. And let's see if I indeed can share my screen. I believe I can. Are people able to see the screen?
Yep, that looks great to me.
Okay, so again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to spend this next a little bit less than a half hour with you. My goal is to present through two lenses for about 15 minutes and then open it up to some Q&A and some dialogue. The two lenses that I'd like to provide in terms of responding to this particular CNC pillar, economic stability, are through the lens of our Larimer Recovery Collaborative, and you can see the graphic before you, and I'll get into that in a moment. And the second lens that I'd like to provide in terms of what the county's doing, and in turn what the community is doing, because it has to be through collaboration, is some highlights of our 2019-2023 strategic plan that we adopted last year that focuses on three overarching goals. Goal number 2, dealing with economic opportunity. So I hope to get through these slides. I hope it'll be informative, and then I welcome the dialogue afterwards and any follow-up that needs to happen. So if you look at this particular
John, very quickly, I apologize for cutting you off. Do you want to switch your slideshow into the present mode? So if you want to go to slideshow towards the top and then present.
Is that better, folks? Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, well, it is for me.
I still see it not in present mode. Do you, towards the top, do you see the tab that says slideshow?
Oh, I see. Oh, in terms of the, at least on my, forgive me, on my computer, it does say slideshow, show taskbar, display settings. Maybe that's, so I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but is this view any better for folks, or? Let's see.
Let's see. Yeah, if people don't mind, we can leave it right as this one.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Cecilia. Thanks for pointing that out. So the first thing I'd like to say about this particular slide is this kind of gives an overview of this Larimer Recovery Collaborative. And you'll see on the outside of the circle, there are three important values, triple bottom line values: resilience and economic health, natural environment, social equity, and inclusion. And these critical values are guiding how we move forward on this recovery effort, which is looking at short-term, medium-term, and long-term in response to the COVID-19 pandemic situation. If you look at the circle a little bit more carefully, you'll see that there are three areas of focus: community support services, government, education and policy, workforce, small business, and economic development. Through these three areas of focus, we have these advisory groups, and then within each of those areas, you'll see there are some sectors, and these will serve as task forces or sectors. So focusing for a moment on the community support services, you can see on the left side there, aging adult service task force, housing stability and homelessness, early learning and child care services, voluntary agencies and faith-based organizations, food and essential needs, and behavioral and physical health services and healthcare access. And obviously you can see that these sectors or these task forces embody or embrace, you know, the four key issues in the economic stability pillar. And so this is kind of the framework that we're using to move forward and to also assess where we currently are at. Let's see, I go to the next one. Here is another way of looking at that circle with the various sections. But this is an organizational chart, and you can see that we have a recovery manager, Laura Levy. We have a deputy recovery manager, and these folks, Laura is working through United Way of Larimer County. Shale is through our Office of Emergency Management. So they're kind of helping to facilitate things. And then you can also see in the areas of focus of the working groups, there are those three key areas: community support services, workforce and business services, government, education, and policy. So the idea is to create this framework, and then within each of those broad areas of focus, you have more specific areas, and we'll get to that in a moment. On the left there in the gray box, you can see support, data users group, IT, recovery contractors. So we are contracting with a company called Synergy, and our IT department has been really instrumental in data collection. And I think that's a key thing that we get from the Colorado National Collaborative Suicide Prevention, the 6 pillars, that we need to look at best practices, and we need to try to make our decisions based on, well, certainly based on people's stories and the data that is before us. This next slide, again, referring to the Larimer Recovery Collaborative, shows how the 3 area sectors and who is engaging in those sectors. And we feel like that's very representative of the community. Once again, if we focus on community and equity recovery group, you can see that we're engaging with the nonprofits, we're engaging and trying to do a better job of working directly with folks that are impacted, people with lived experience, community members, faith-based organizations, volunteer organizations, and certainly different levels of government. So this is another way of looking at that organizational chart and who is being engaged as far as the municipalities and folks in the community. Once again, you can see the 3 fundamental core values: social equity and inclusion, environment, resilience, and economic health. It's the triple bottom line approach that we often hear a lot about. There are those 3 area sectors. And then once again, within the community support services, you can see the different task forces that will be doing some of the legwork. In terms of some of the things that are occurring very quickly in the area of food security, you can see that that is a prominent issue or sector within this long-term Larimer Recovery Collaborative framework. Second bullet point, coordination locally between the WIC and the SNAP program. And again, I can respond to questions there. I know one of the issues that's come up regarding SNAP is how well is Larimer County doing regarding people, households, working people, children, persons with disabilities, older adults, if they're eligible for SNAP benefits, are they enrolled? And we've actually made some progress. I think a year or so ago, 40%, that number was at 40%, and we're now at 35%. In other words, more people who are eligible, who could benefit from SNAP, which provides significant food security, are actually enrolling and receiving the resources. One of the things we're also considering is a partnership with Bohemian and the Poudre School District to further improve participation in the SNAP programs, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is to children that qualify for free and reduced lunches, that they would be able to, they'd be referred for applying for the SNAP. And then there was, one of the issues that came up a couple of years ago when I first started as county commissioner is, what are we doing in terms of community outreach to make sure folks know that, this is something that they could apply for. And there was a new outreach position. It's working through the Food Bank of Larimer County. That started in the fall of 2019, and that is also helping with participation. That's a little bit about food security. There are more details. Housing, transportation, and benefits. Once again, housing, transportation, infrastructure, that is a key. Those are key components of our long-term recovery framework. Referring to the Larimer County 5-year strategic plan, if you look at goal number 2, dealing with economic opportunity and community well-being, the 4th objective, there are 4 specific objectives within that goal. I'll get to that in a moment. Affordable housing, transportation, and also employment for persons with disabilities are really, really important, and we are making some progress there. Another thing that the county is involved in is we are directly participating in the Northern Colorado Continuum of Care that's out there to people who are experiencing homelessness. Access to childcare, again, it's included in our long-term recovery. The 5-year strategic plan, goal number 3, deals with access to childcare. We're working very closely with the Early Childhood Council of Larimer County, and you can see the other bullet points I just mentioned. And then one thing that's really cool is that CCAP, the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program, for the last number of years, there's been a waiting list, but we have been able to remove the waiting list. In other words, be able to have people apply and more people access child care assistance program. This just gives a high-level overview of goal number 2 within our 5-year strategic plan. All this is on our website. If you go to larimer.org/strategic plan, you can see some of this. But you can see the 4 objectives. And the first one deals with community well-being. We have already put out an RFP for a community mapping tool. The second one deals with employment, in particular employment of persons with disabilities. We have repurposed somebody in our HR department who is now, whose job title is Inclusion Administrator, increasing capacity for childcare. I spoke a little bit about that, and addressing the housing overburden ratio. Just zooming right through the last slides I have, and these are on the website as well, from 2019. There's a lot of information in here. I'm not going to go through it, but the main takeaway is the slide on the left is the rental market. In Larimer County, 35% of the households rent, whether it's they pay a lot rent if they're in a mobile home park, or whether they rent an apartment. And you can see that the wage necessary to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Larimer County is $24.10. This makes reference to the minimum wage as $11.10, but this is from last year, and we know that in January of this year it did go up to $12 an hour, and it's good that there was a reference to that earlier. So that's on the rental side. That graph on the bottom shows the different kinds of occupations and which occupations actually allow people to be able to afford a place to rent in Fort Collins in Larimer County. And I think we all know that one definition of affordability is you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your adjusted gross income towards housing costs. The thing on the right is home ownership. You can see that in order to afford a medium-priced home in Larimer County, you need to be making about $92,000 a year. Finally, with childcare, there's the issue of cost, of course, and access. And infant and toddler care, of course, is much more expensive. And then, especially in light of the pandemic, childcare access has become even that much more problematic. But I encourage you to look at this infographic on the website, and hopefully that can help inform the discussion. Cecilia, I believe I'll stop there.
Awesome. All right, that was great. And John, I'm going to ask you maybe I'm going to stop sharing so we can all come back together as a group. Thank you for doing that. And I had just a couple of questions pop up in the chat, so I'm going to read those now. Let's see. This was a great one. So I believe when we were talking about SNAP and WIC, Brian asked, were some of these benefits cut recently and less people can now get these benefits? And the same thing regarding daycare benefits. Have any of those benefits recently been cut? You want to share about that a little bit?
I think I can speak to that. So with regard to SNAP, of course, the dollars, the money that helps people to access food stamps and to use those food stamps in a variety of ways, those are federal dollars. And there, I don't know exactly if there have been some cuts to the USDA and the Farm Bill, which basically is the legislation that includes the SNAP program. So I don't know specifically if there have been cuts, but I do know there have been more stringent requirements that have created some confusion in terms of households that are eligible related to work. So that's one thing I would say regarding that question. And as far as a child care assistance program, we do get, there are federal dollars through the Child Development Block Grant and also state monies. And there have been increases, to subsidized child care from the state and even from the federal government, who's recognized that as really, really important. And that's helped contribute to how we can end our waiting list for the CCAP program in Larimer County. But overall, with the budget crisis that the state is feeling, the new budget that was just approved for the fiscal year that we're in, clearly there have been cuts in everything across the board, and that does impact access to child care.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And then a question here just about from the websites. I posted that link to the Larimer County strategic plan, which is so helpful to read through. And then we were just wondering, is the slides from the Larimer Recovery Collaborative also on the website? Do you happen to know that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. And I asked that question the other day. The short answer is no, they are not yet up there. I think we're very close to establishing a Larimer Recovery Collaborative website that would include these slides and additional information. We're not quite there yet. I mean, right now, we're in phase 1 of data collection. And for example, folks who are involved with nonprofits and other sectors of our community should have received a survey, a questionnaire, unmet needs survey. And it's basically asking questions related to, in your sector, let's say it's housing or something like that, how were things, describe how things were pre-pandemic, what has changed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what do you see, in the next couple of months and beyond. And so that is out there, and eventually all that information will be much more public, and there'll be more opportunities for the community to engage.
Wonderful, thank you. And maybe following this event, if you want to send me that survey, I'd be happy to send it out to our mailing list so everyone here can participate in that as well. And then I'm just curious, a question from myself. I'm wondering, for the average person who's maybe passionate about this pillar, about economic stability, about housing, about food security, again, this is something that really impacts all of us in one way or another. I too am paying rent in Fort Collins, so I know what that is like. So I'm wondering, how can people get involved?
Well, that's that's kind of one of the bottom line questions here. And, just if I may go back for a moment, Cecilia, to the matter of the slides that I showed on the Larimer Recovery Collaborative, even though they're not on a quote website yet, if folks are interested, I would think with your help and Rachel's help, we have these slides. We could send them out to people. Maybe there's a way to do that, and then people could take a look at that and have the information in front of them. Regarding your question, I think it depends, what niche or what passion that you have. For example, one of the things that the county has done regarding our strategic plan and the fourth objective dealing with affordable housing is we've reconstituted our Larimer County Housing Authority. And we're in the process of updating our IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, with the various housing authorities like Housing Catalyst, like Loveland Housing Authority, and like some of the other ones in Estes Park, Wellington, et cetera. So, those entities are doing some really good work. And I think if one of your passions I was going to get at is dealing with folks who are living in mobile home parks. One of the things that the city is doing and that the county is wanting to do is, how do we incentivize, encourage people who own their homes, pay lot rents, to incentivize and make it easier to create what are called resident-owned communities. So if you have a passion for supporting people who live in mobile home parks, which tend to be people that work in the service sector, are making less money, dealing with a lot of challenges and all of that, that's an example of an area, that folks can get involved in. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. Neighbor to Neighbor is doing some really good work regarding rental assistance. I'm sure most folks are aware of that. So that's my answer, Cecilia. I think it's a matter of what your passion is within this, within this continuum of housing. When we talk about housing, there's a continuum, folks who are living on the streets to market-based housing. If your passion is helping first-time home buyers, there are ways to do that as well. If your passion is helping folks who are homeless, the continuum of care, the work that's being done by groups like Homeward Alliance, that would be my answer to your question, Cecilia.
Wonderful, thank you. If anyone has questions, please type them in the chat. And in the meantime, I'll ask you one more from me, John. So I'm curious. I know that, equity is not a new conversation. There are people who have been doing this kind of work long before my time, but it has in many ways taken a national stage. So I'm curious, for Larimer County, as we're developing this plan, this strategic plan for the next several years, if there's a particular equity framework that you're working with, or a lens that you're taking, or if you can just speak a little bit about how equity overlaps with economic stability.
Yes, thank you. A couple of thoughts come to mind. For example, recently our Economic and Workforce Development Center, and that's critical. That's what we have in place to help folks find work, to access training opportunities, et cetera. There is a Workforce Development Board, and they meet monthly, I believe. And the most recent meeting, the topic was regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they had a wonderful presenter from Colorado State University, Carmen Rivera. So there is, that's one example of a lens that's being used. She gave a really excellent presentation. Another lens that I think is informing the progress we're trying to make in Larimer County, and actually the city of Fort Collins gets a lot of credit, because I think they're ahead of us in this drama of life on this matter. But I know that I've been in touch with Adams County, for example. If people haven't seen some of the resources that they put together, Adams County Department of Human Services, they have done some pretty extraordinary work on this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for example, one of the tools that they have is they've created this matrix, or this continuum, where organizations could take a look at this and see how their various departments or sections in their business, or in their perhaps nonprofit or their agency, how they fare. I think that's another lens. And finally, I'll mention there's some really exciting work that I've been involved with Colorado State University and the Office of Extension, in particular the FLTI, the Family Leadership Training Institute, and working with Patty Schmidt, who's a good friend and colleague. I was part of a group of 34 people nationally that provided some input over the last 6 or 8 months. And they've actually created, this is, to me, is amazing. They've created what they call a Civic Capacity Index, CCI, and it's indicators that can be used to determine the capacity a community has to do what many of us would agree is really critical, and that is, quote, community-driven change. I offer that as another lens, and the county may actually, I brought that to the attention of Laura Levy, Laura Walker, and some other folks, and we feel like it would be a very useful tool to have, as we do this recovery work. And so we're engaging with them on how the county might serve as a pilot. And I think other groups should find out about that and see what, how they could interact with that particular tool.
Very interesting, John. Thank you. I do want to ask one more question that just popped in the chat, and then I'll move us towards closing in about 1 minute. But yes. I would like to hear your thoughts. We had a question come in that says, is there any progress towards a homeless campus being built in Larimer County to make access to services easier for this population that would include the missions?
I can't, the short answer is I don't know. I assume there's progress. I know that when Northside was down as a facility that was accommodating the needs of folks, that created some serious gaps. I believe the city of Fort Collins is still convening the task force. They are looking at this very deliberatively. So I don't know exactly where things are at, but there are a lot of good organizations, as I mentioned, Homeward Alliance and Homeward 2020, et cetera, that are working on this issue. At the moment, we're trying to navigate issues related to the behavioral health facility. We're trying to focus on that and make sure that we can do the right thing there, because that's a key to folks who are experiencing homelessness, as we all know, are often people that are dealing with mental health or substance use disorder issues.
Right. And it looks like Kristen Stevens, good to see you, by the way, from Fort Collins City Council, responded to this question as well. So thank you for jumping in there, Kristen. Alrighty, so a couple thoughts just as we're closing. Nobody go anywhere quite yet, but since our event is about to draw to a close, I'm going to put a link to our event survey here in the chat. This is super important for us in order to connect with all of you to get involved in work groups or trainings or next steps, as well as a nonprofit. All you other nonprofits know this. Surveys are so critical to what we do. So I'm going to put that link in the chat, and we'll also put it in the chat again in our closing session. So just a couple of closing words here. Thank you so much, John, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it so much, and I'm excited to continue this conversation around economic stability, especially as it relates to suicide prevention. So for those of you, again, interested in joining a work group or a training, please do fill out that post survey so we can follow up with you via email. Thank you all for attending this session, and we're now going to switch back over to the main room to do our final quick closing thoughts. So you can enter that room by either clicking on this link that I am going to put in the chat, or once again, if you want to close out back to our main ASP event page and click on the main session, that will take you there as well. All right, thank you everyone. So again, just that bottom link that I just popped in, and we'll see you all in the main room. I'll stand for a moment just to make sure everyone gets out okay. Hi, Arlene, good to see ya. Alrighty, we're mostly all out. I'm popping that link in the chat just one more time. That'll take you back to the main room, or if for some reason that doesn't work for you, back on our Alliance for Suicide Prevention website, the event page, you'll click on the button that says main session. And I'll see you all over there. I'm gonna go ahead and end our meeting now.